Hey everybody, and welcome to another week here at ANOTHEN Global Studios in Charlotte, North Carolina, with my partner in crime, Jim Black. Mate, we have been around a lot these years together, haven't we?
No question.
We've had a lot of fun, and we're just going to just share a little bit together here today, and going to do a series of 2 or 3 of these short videos for you to learn a little bit more behind the scenes.
A lot of you folks have been asking why we made a transition from Crossroads, where we met, to ANOTHEN. And as we answer those questions, the question comes up, what is ANOTHEN?
Good question. Great place to start, isn't it?
Yes.
ANOTHEN actually originated, Jim, out of the Bible, which is always a good place to start when you're starting something Christian.
Yes.
From John chapter 3, verse 3. Where one of the religious leaders named Nicodemus comes to Jesus in the night and effectively asking, what have I got to do to step into the kingdom of God? And Jesus gives him that well-known response, you must be born again. The word again is the word ANOTHEN, and it means from above. So ANOTHEN started with us helping people to learn how to live from the perspective of heaven towards the earth, how to think how heaven thinks, speak how heaven speaks, live how heaven lives on earth as it is in heaven. We tried to look at a number of expressions of that, because that's great to be able to say it, but how do you do it? So 3 things, really. The first of all is we started coaching, and we've been coaching business leaders now, from small startups to senior executives of very large companies. I guess probably around 16, 17 countries now we've been doing that in the last 5 years or so. And so we've been doing that under ANOTHEN Business Solutions. Secondly, we opened ANOTHEN Publishing House, and we created some tools for people to be able to learn how to think, speak, and live on earth as it is in heaven. And I wrote Julie wrote The Boardroom of the Inner Man. I wrote Think, Speak, Live, Business from Heaven's Perspective, and other tools that we're creating along the way. And then the third thing is ANOTHEN Microchurches. Helping people to take the love of God right where they are, the perspective of heaven upon the earth, and to be able to live that out in smaller community without having to build a big building, have 1,000 programs, but be able to have the tools to learn how to love their neighbour as they love themselves, and then love the world around them as well. And we've put those countries together along with what we've been doing with the coaching. We're up to over 20 nations now we've been active in the last 5 years.
So it seems as though when we were growing up that we had different denominations, right? Religion, but you had the Episcopalians, you had it's easily 20, right?
Oh, it'll be more than that. Gosh, there's a lot. But your major ones, you're right, your Episcopalians, your Baptists, your Methodists, your Lutheran, your Catholic. I mean, they're sort of some of your bigger ones.
Yes, and the micro churches that we have are not going to splinter off like that.
No, that's right.
How are we going to keep it that way?
Well, I think the thing is just the fluidity of how microchurches work. So, for example, we're not threatened by the need to control a particular group. So a microchurch might last for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 6 months, 12 months, 10 years. I really don't mind. It's not up to me to control that.
Yes.
It may just meet a need in a moment. Rather than it's something that goes on for a long time. Others may go on for a long time. So the key is not about controlling what a group needs to do and how it needs to do it and how long it needs to do it for. So first of all, unlike traditional denominations, we're not threatened by those sorts of things. We don't find the need to control those types of outcomes. We allow the work of God to work in each group by itself.
We don't have kids. Let's go with kids right now, because when we started off with religion, when I started off, we started going to church, being dragged to church on Sunday mornings, right? And in the black community.
So I had a friend of mine say, I grew up with a drug problem. They drugged me to this church, they drugged me to that church, they drugged me to another church.
And kicking and screaming.
Right.
And actually, I didn't even know what was going on. But there was a time, I guess, when I was maybe 10 or 11 years old. And I guess most kids at that age come into understanding or at least learning more about the Bible. And so how important is teaching of the Bible, not from the Bible, but teaching of the Bible to children?
Oh, I think it's very important. I think one of the reasons why we have major identity issues in this world is because people don't know the story. Our lives are stories, and if our stories aren't connected to other stories, then they just become, something you can't grab a hold of, and there's no reference point. The Bible story is a story that's still playing out right now. We are right now doing this. We are part of the story of God. That story is unfolding moment by moment by moment. Jesus in the Bible is known as the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. The beginning and the end of what? The story. And so like any story, every chapter that comes after the ones before, it makes sense in light of where the previous chapters have been. Well, likewise, when we understand the story of God, as today unfolds into tomorrow and the next week and the next month and the next year, it makes sense in light of the past. And the past is the explanation and the revelation of the story of God with people. We call it here the grand narrative of God that's playing out. And our story makes so much more sense when we see how it plugs into his grand story.
Where does a story actually begin? Does it begin with the 7 days that God created the earth and everything in it? Does it, and Adam and Eve? Begins with Adam.
Yeah. Again,
that's the story. That's where it starts.
In terms of what we're being given as a historical narrative, then I have to say yes, because that's where the Bible begins. So I like to begin where the Bible begins. That's a good reference point to start with. Now, to say, though, that that's all there is to the story would not be true, because God is eternal. And so what happens outside of that story before, then gosh, we don't know yet. But God hasn't seen fit to reveal that part of what happened prior to, in the beginning, God said. What we do know is that before God even spoke, there was chaos. In fact, we look at the Hebrew word there when it says that the earth was formless and void. So suddenly there was an earth there. It was formless and void. And in the Hebrew, it uses the phrase tohu bohu, which in the English we could translate somewhat accurately as topsy-turvy or chaotic. And then God speaks and order comes. That's something that we know is true of God time and time again in the chaos of our lives. If we let God speak, then order can come out of the chaos. In fact, at Jesus, that's exactly what he did. And there's leadership models being built around Jesus, and it's called chaotic leadership, where he brings order out of chaos.
Does ANOTHEN begin with Jesus, or is there an ANOTHEN prior to the birth of Jesus?
Yeah, I think to be a believer is to be someone who is connected to the beginning of the story. So it really is the story of God with humanity doesn't start with Jesus. The story of God with ANOTHEN doesn't start with Jesus. It starts right back to God in a garden with man and woman in an intimate relationship together with them. And that's what God is calling us in some ways back to, but in other ways to even a greater expression of. Because now we have, when we say yes to Jesus, we have the Holy Spirit living in us. Adam and Eve didn't have that. We do. So there's new things that happen. And if we use the vernacular of the day, we could almost use the term upgrades that happen that Adam and Eve did not have.
Do you believe that during with the Old Testament, I guess we're talking about, right? That's what it's called.
Yeah, that's right.
Did anybody ever hear God speaking?
Well, the one that comes to mind, there's plenty of examples, is the prophet Samuel. And Eli was the priest at the time, and the Lord kept waking Samuel up. And Samuel thought it was Eli, and he kept getting up and he go, well, what is it, Eli? You called me. And Eli goes, I didn't call you, go back to sleep. Well, 3 times that happened. Finally, Eli goes, ding, that must be God trying to get your attention.
Yes.
So there's a very clear example, but plenty throughout the Old Testament. He spoke particularly through the prophets. in the Old Testament. And so you'll see your Jeremiahs and the likes, and Daniel and people like that, where there's very clear messages God speaks. Ezekiel being another one, and Amos and Obadiah and Jonah, Nahum, Micah, Habakkuk,
Yes.
Zephaniah, Haggai. I mean, all of these people God spoke to throughout the Old Testament and more. And in the New Testament, though, we see a very different thing, because now with God's Spirit in us, he speaks directly to us.
But you see that it seems that when people became people, that God made mistakes, because it always seemed to be that he had to right the ship, so to speak.
Wow,
Right?
that's a great question. In fact, that question's going to take a bit of time to answer. So I suggest maybe if people want to watch us in the next session, the next exciting episode, we might go after that one, because that actually unlocks another big can of worms that are the big questions and the real questions that rest on many people's heart. So stick with us, because we're going to come back again in another episode as we go after some of these bigger questions that ANOTHEN is one of the pieces that God uses to help resolve and help you live deeper and further in encounters with his perfect love. Because guess what? He wants to love the world through you.